two, one. You are live. Hey, Tony, can you hear me? Okay, fantastic. No, that's wonderful. I sorry, man. I must explain to the viewers my humble apologies. What happened was I had to go and get some sugar water and tamarind to put under my tongue for the anxiety of getting online here. So sorry, I'm a little bit late. No, for sure, man. Tony, I just wanted to check if I can't share your link from the Facebook live to my Facebook there. Okay. There we go. No, Tony, there's only a fat and fluffy landscape on your video there. On No, but what I'm saying to you is that on the live link there's a video of me there, but there's no video of you. Oh, okay, cool. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, I did. Yeah. 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 Hmm. Yeah, no, it's a it's a very real thing, Tony. I think it's exactly what you're saying there. Now, I think lockdown itself is one element, or rather a trigger to trigger one's anxiety, and it's not the source of anxiety. It's not a brand new conversation. This thing has been around forever and ever and ever. We've just given it different names, and people who's experienced it often they can't put a name to it. And as human beings, we long to put labels and names on things in order for us to understand it. So if you don't understand it, that's the danger of anxiety, that it can lead to much further or much worse mental conditions, and much worse kind of like situations in life, even like that I know of. So I think the more we know about anxiety, the better. The more we are equipped to deal with our anxiety. Mhm. Yeah. Okay. There's a difference between anxiety and an anxiety disorder. This is the distinction that we have to make from the get-go. Okay. So anxiety is an overwhelming feeling of fear, right? Or disorientation as to where you are in your life and how to deal with stressful situations. That's the definition of anxiety. Okay. Uh, uh, Everybody in their life sometime will experience anxiety. All of us have experienced anxiety. An anxiety disorder is what I've just said to you now, in a chronic kind of like everyday situation. So an anxiety disorder is when you are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, it's now reached a point of where this overwhelming feeling of stress and anxiety becomes disruptful to your life. You can no longer function in your everyday kind of job in your family. That's when you are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, and that's my situation. Okay, I can't see you either, Tony. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Okay, so I think it could be different experiences for different people, fueled by a lot of things. You're kind of like your personality, where you find yourself, your surroundings, the atmosphere, all those kind of things. They are all contributing factors to what you experience when you have an anxiety or panic attack, as people may call it. So I can only speak of my personal experience. I'd never, ever, ever even thought about anxiety. My first encounter with anxiety came about in 2011, when a friend's wife actually called me and said, "Listen, I don't know what's going on. Can you please come and see? My husband is on the floor in a ball. I don't know. I think he's having a heart attack." Okay? And so I left my office. I rushed off to go and see them at their house. And it's exactly what you were saying. He was laying on the floor in a ball, and as a grown man in a fetal position, you know, I had never seen anybody. His body was drenched with sweat. He could hardly hold a breath. His diaphragm was taking very, very, very shallow breaths, and he couldn't even speak. Eventually I had run outside, and I come from the northern Stony. As altyd 'n huisraad vir alles. So I saw a lavender bush outside, and I remember my mother used to crush lavender to kind of like create a mellow atmosphere. Ek het vroeër toe praat ek van die tamarijn. Tamarijn is een van die ander goed ook wat ons gedrink het, jy weet, in suikerwater and all this kind of stuff. I actually I crushed some of the lavender, and it actually helped. And I think I don't know if the lavender had a placebo effect, but the point was to get him to breathe. So to take your focus off what you're feeling in that moment, the overwhelming feeling of helplessness and absolute fearfulness, to kind of like create the consciousness that you are taking a breath. And I think that's what actually helped. I'm not going to discount the lavender's effect, but the point was to get him to breathe, because the less oxygen that goes into your body, the less you can actually concentrate. The more carbon dioxide is still within your lungs, and your organs are not getting the correct amount of oxygen in order for you to function correctly. So eventually he started coming out of it every 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, and we could actually start speaking, and he could start communicating verbally as to what was going on. So from that, I had forgotten about that situation. He had gone to doctor. They gave him some medication, all that kind of stuff, and I was working I was in a management position, a regional management position, and I was on my way to East London one morning. And I remember I stopped at the KFC to grab a cup of coffee. My wife was telling me I must take the earphones out. I said, unplug it. Why? Okay, because he told you, so we're trying all options. It wouldn't be the earphones. Okay, cool. Okay, so on my way to East London, Tony, I stopped to grab a cup of coffee, and I remember having a conversation with this client at 7:15 in the morning, because when you work in sales and in a very stressful kind of like environment like that, there's no on and off, there's no time, there's no kind of like home time and work time. It's all just one big fat timeline, and I was driving, and I remember I was just past Kucha, and after I got off the phone with this customer, everything just stopped.
Mm.
Literally just stopped. And I pulled over onto the side of the road, and I remember I had a Bluetooth car kit and I just pressed the last number dialed on my Bluetooth car kit, and thankfully it was a colleague of mine. And he asked me, "Where are you?" And I didn't even know where I was at the stage anymore. And I
Mm.
just said to him, "Listen, I'm on my way to East London. I'm on the side of the road. I don't know where I am." And he rushed off from Port Elizabeth, came to come and get me on the side of the road, and off we went to doctor. And that was the day I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. It's my first time ever experiencing anything like that.
Wow, that's hectic, bro. I can only imagine. I thought I had felt like that before, but I can honestly say not to that extreme. I've been anxious before. I've been very, very anxious before, to the point where you are shaking with I can't call it fear, but I think it's the feeling of the unknown. And I would probably think that the very next thing is that. So coming back to lockdown, Niven, what is
Okay, Tony, I
lockdown?
can't hear you.
Okay, let me try and speak louder. Coming back to lockdown then, how does lockdown make this thing reappear or make anxiety an issue again? Can you hear me at all? Nothing. Okay, I don't know. Do you want to perhaps unplug the earphones and see if I speak louder, because my volume's completely up? Um, my mic's fine. Let me just see. My camera's
There we
there.
go. There we go.
Oh,
There you go. Now you're back
okay,
here.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I see this thing is messing me around. There's my twin brother also. So let me just hide that, and let's try that. Okay, cool. I'm back then. So
Yeah.
so so looking at, I'll just repeat the question. Coming back to lockdown, then, how does lockdown play a role in almost activating or stirring anxiety or anxiety disorder? What about lockdown brings on this thing again?
Okay, so I don't think it's lockdown itself. It's the reason
Okay,
for lockdown. Okay,
right.
so if you look at if you, everybody goes home every day, right? Your
Yeah,
home is supposed to be a safe place. It's a place where you should be most comfortable. It's the people that you love. They live there with you, and you live your
yeah,
life out there. So the house being in your house is not a problem. It's the reason for why we are being locked down, and the absence of the freedom to move around. That was what spiked my anxiety. The first week of lockdown, I was a mess, absolute mess. And I think it's because a big part of anxiety disorder, Tony, is that it's the fear of the unknown. For normal people, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. We're gonna get through this. My wife is one of these people. She is
yeah.
an amazing human being. I don't know how she does it, but she's been my solid rock through this whole thing. And so for people who are living with anxiety disorder,
Yeah.
the lockdown, the trigger for me was, what if one of us gets sick? What if I get sick? What if my wife gets sick? And come and tell you how bad it gets. It gets to the point of where you start making plans for the eventualities. Not that that's a
Wow.
bad thing, but you become fixated on this thing that you immediately jump from 0 to 100. It's the only potential outcome of this thing is that I'm going to die, or my family is going to die, or somebody close to me is going to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's almost an irrational fear of the unknown. It's
Wow.
walking on water,
Yeah.
and knowing that you can't swim. That's the feeling that it gets. It's an absolutely overwhelming feeling, and sometimes it's absolutely irrational. And the most
Right.
irrational part about this is that you would know, and people on this stream would know that if you meet me in person, I'm probably one of the most easiest going people you'll ever meet in your life.
Yeah.
But when there's a trigger for anxiety, that person almost switches off, and you become invaded by a different personality that can't do anything else except worrying yourself into a
Sure.
crippling ball of fear.
Sure. I was actually going to come back to that very point. And even the person, a lot of people that might be listening this afternoon and watching us might say, "But I know Niven, the person on stage, a comedian. I know Niven, the person on Facebook that's chirpy, that makes us laugh, that says things that is out of the norm, that speaks about Arcadia, that can make a joke of anything under the sun." And now you are telling me there's another side to this person that is
Yep.
like Wokai, another side of of a person that might be like so many other people that's listening in this afternoon, eh? How does
Yep. Yeah.
how does that? I think the people that is most closest to you is family. How does
Mm,
anxiety affect your family, your immediate family? Stacy,
mm,
Tyler, brothers, sisters, that sort of thing. Even close
mm.
friends. I mean,
Yeah.
the very reason why we're having this conversation is because I obviously know about it. We know about people and friends who have anxiety disorder. How does it
Yeah.
affect the people at home?
I think that's the sad thing about it. If your family is not equipped to deal with anxiety, it could be a very, very dangerous thing, Tony. And I think my experience with anxiety and my family is that, and my boy, I think, Tyler, I've got a 9-year-old boy, for those who don't know, and he, he, he said it in the most profound way that I possibly could. I couldn't have said it myself. Recently, I was hospitalized for what was a brain tumor scare, and when I came out of the hospital, obviously this anxiety thing flared up again and all this kind of stuff. And about 3, 4 days later, my son came to me, and he came to come and sit next to me, and he said, "Daddy, you're almost back to your normal self again."
Wow.
And I for a moment there, I was totally oblivious to the fact that he had observed me, and he could see that something was wrong, you
Yeah.
know. And so the impact on your family is that if you're, especially if you're not equipped to deal with it, um,
Right.
your family might be even too afraid because you're so on edge. You want to. It's the instinct is to protect them, so that's a good instinct. We don't want to get rid of that instinct, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I always say this. I've learned to live with my anxiety, and I treat it like a passenger in my car. Is that when you sit with me in my car, you put your seatbelt on. You're not
Yeah.
allowed to change gears. You are
Yeah.
not allowed to touch the radio, and you are certainly not allowed to touch the steering wheel, right? And so for people who are equipped, that's how you see your
Wow.
anxiety. It's
Wait.
something that you live with. It's not something that you're going to pray away or get rid of soon or anything like that.
Right.
And I'm not saying people don't ever recover from anxiety, but for those who
Yeah.
are living with an anxiety disorder, this is exactly what it is like for me. And so I look at my anxiety daily and I say, hey, listen, I know you are there. I know you actually there to protect me also, because in many ways it's a defense mechanism for
Right.
us to not harm ourselves, right? And so my family, thankfully, has walked this journey with me for a very long time. It's been a while now,
Correct.
and so the impact on family is, I would say, it's disheartening to see, or rather, that day for me, I came to the realization that my boy wants his dad. Right? And
Yeah.
when my anxiety flares up, or I don't manage my anxiety well, it impacts
Right.
my family negatively. It impacts my child, who immediately notices a change in my mood, or I'm a little bit aggressive in my speech. My wife has gotten to the point of where she absolutely ignores this thing, and she makes me do my exercises. She's the one person who knows. And so people who live with anxiety often have telltale signs.
Yeah.
For me, I start doing this with my fingers without me even knowing
Oh,
it. That
yeah. Yeah.
right, and so it's a subconscious thing. Your amygdala flares up, adrenaline gets released into your body because now it's fight to
Mm,
flight. There's no impending danger. There's
mm,
absolutely no danger, but your
mm.
brain interprets the signals around you or the
Right.
triggers around you as danger. And so now what happens is it says to you fight or flight now, right? And so
Right.
my response to that is, and I often don't know it, and Stacy picks it up. I'll start doing this with my fingers, and she'll say, she'll pick it up and she'll tell me, and she'll walk over to me and she'll tell me, you have to take a deep breath, because
Yeah.
breathing is
Yeah.
one of
Breathing.
the only things that actually helps
Yeah.
with
Very true.
anxiety, Tony.
Very
And so the impact for her is she's become almost like my sounding wall. She's become my monitor, and she'll often walk me through an anxiety attack. And
Yeah.
I've seen the negative impact it has on marriage is a coming together of two lives, Tony, and it's
Yeah.
two people who come from different walks of life. Often, I
Yeah.
often describe it as two people driving on a highway and crashing into each other, and somehow having to pick up the pieces and building a new car
Right.
from those two car parts that's left.
Right.
And Stacey's been absolutely magnificent. It has had a negative impact on us from time to time, where
Mm.
she also needs a breather. There are moments where my anxiety flares up for 2 3 weeks at a time, and I can
Yeah.
see it takes its toll on her. So I'm extremely grateful for Stacey for helping me through
Yeah.
my journey with anxiety.
Wow. Just coming back to everybody who's tuned in and listening to us this afternoon, if you got any questions, I'm sure you've seen this thing in your home, in families, at work, and you almost put a question to it, and you almost want to label people negatively, not understanding what this is. Throw some questions of us. Tell us what your thoughts are. Do you know anybody who has anxiety that perhaps is not diagnosed, that needs help? Speaking of diagnosis, and even medication. Do you
Hmm.
have you used medication? Will you use medication? Does it help? Would you advise people who are in this type of situation to get help and medication? Where would it start?
Absolutely. Okay, so your first stop would be to go and see your MD and tell him about your situation or the overwhelming feelings of fear
Right.
and worry, especially when it comes to work stress, financial stress, when it comes
Yeah.
to things that's out of your control, basically. So go to your MD. Your MD will most likely give you a referral letter to a
Listen.
counseling
Oh,
psychologist.
you're not referring to the MD of my company. You're referring to a
No,
medical
no, no,
doctor.
no. Your medical doctor, yes. Go to your GP. Let me say it like that,
Okay. Yeah.
okay? Go
Because
to your
he's not
general practitioner.
listening. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. You were saying?
There's plenty of help around. I think that's the
Right.
first thing that people must understand is that this thing doesn't need to be a debilitating kind of like crippling situation that makes your life stop. There's
Yeah.
plenty
Yeah.
and there's an out. Okay, so go to your
Right.
GP, you get a referral letter, go and see a counseling psychologist. I had a good few sessions with my psychologist. You sit down and you talk. I had a nice little old boereoom that kind of like sat me down and he spoke to me,
Right.
and it's basically just getting to the point of understanding why you have anxiety, what bothers you to
Yeah.
the point of where it affects you on a physiological level. And when I say a
Right.
physiological level, it's like you. For me, my legs go lame. I get to the point of where I can't breathe properly.
Yeah.
Those are all things that you actually need to talk through, and talking through it makes you understand it better. And when you
Right.
understand something better, you can manage it better. All right.
Absolutely.
So from there onwards, they will decide, him together with your GP, whether there's further intervention needed,
Yeah.
further counseling,
Yeah.
further kind of like treatment, and they can put you on a mild antidepressant if that's what it calls for. I was lucky enough not to be put in an antidepressant. I only use
Mm.
anxiety medication. Okay,
Okay.
and I don't use it every day as well.
Right.
So for people with anxiety disorder, you would know the moment when you get up in the morning, you would know that today is going to be one of those days.
Oh wow.
It's
Oh,
you just know. My wife actually knows. Like she'll if I wake up and about 20, 25, 30 minutes later, it's not because you're not a
yeah.
morning person. The telltale signs are there. She'll phone me
Yeah.
or she'll tell me, listen, I think you should take some medication today, or are you okay? Or she'll phone me an hour later. They are
Yeah.
when you live with it, you start seeing the kind of like the telltale marks of the beast. You know,
Right.
you learn
Right.
to you learn to say, okay, listen, I see you now, and the more you can see it, Tony, the more you can disarm those things. Because if you
Absolutely.
don't disarm them, if you don't disarm them, that is when it takes control and it takes a hold of you to the point of where you
Yeah.
can't function in your everyday kind of like
Very.
behaviors anymore
Yeah,
that you need
I
to.
think when you a bit earlier you mentioned a very important aspect on recognizing. I think it also starts with recognizing that this thing is part of me,
Yeah.
or you used a very nice analogy. It's like driving with it as a passenger in your car. You know it is there, but it's not allowed to control anything. It's not going to talk to you
Yes.
about the speed. It's not going to
Yes.
the volume of the radio up. So I think that acknowledgement is critical in the journey of getting help and helping yourself,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
recognize this thing exists.
Yeah.
It is senseless to almost ignore it. I remember growing up. I think a lot of times the adults around us at the time would hide a lot of things in alcohol, for example, where
Yeah.
they would
Yeah.
they would they would have a tough week at work, and then when it gets to Friday, Saturday, my father was one of those who he was a hardworking guy, but get to Friday, Saturday, then it's like there's liquor in
Mm.
abundance, and this is the thing that almost serves as a coping mechanism, and that, needless to say, is not a good remedy when it comes to dealing with anxiety.
Yep.
You touched on some of the triggers in your life that causes this thing to flare up.
Mm.
Um, Tell us a bit about that. Is there anything else that you know for sure? If this thing happens, it will trigger that for you as a
Okay.
person.
Yes. My first trigger was when my cell phone rings, because I would immediately connect it to a difficult conversation I would have with a client.
Right.
And as silly as that might
Wow.
sound, people don't realize how it connects in your brain. Your brain is a circuit of electricity, right? And so
Yeah.
it forms neural pathways, and those
Right.
memories get stored, right? And so whenever you are in that same situation again, it's almost like if you think about a lemon, right? Even if you don't have a lemon, you can and you imagine smelling a lemon or
Right.
biting into a lemon, you can still have that feeling, even though you're not you're not biting into the lemon. You remember the sense that it created,
Yeah.
the uncomfortable sense in the back of of your throat. It's the same as me saying to you, don't think of a pink elephant. A pink elephant doesn't even exist, but your mind can conjure up a picture of a pink elephant, right?
Mm,
So the
mm,
mind is that powerful that it actually throws back and creates these feelings and emotions all over again. So my first
yeah.
experience of where I learned what a trigger was, in fact, was I was booked off after this situation with at work, and I was at the hospital, and I came out of it and all of that. About 2 weeks later, I was in at home, and physical exercise is one of the things that I would encourage people to do. Tony, you don't have to go out and run a
Mm,
marathon. Go and have a
right.
long walk. Get your blood pumping a little bit. That was a big out for me. So I started playing tennis back then, and me and a
Right.
good friend of mine, Shaq Hewitt, in fact, he helped walk me through this whole situation
Sure.
was trying to get out of it. And so we went to go and play tennis, and I pulled up. I was driving. I pulled up to my driveway, and I got out of the out of my car, and
Yeah.
immediately I froze up, and I had a panic attack as I got out of the car. I was feeling
Wow.
brilliant because of the physical exercise, but
Right.
the trigger was it felt as if I was coming from work to go and put on my laptop at home again after I came from work. and I,
Good.
I and I didn't even know it. Only when I got into the house and came to my senses, I realized it was in my routine that I started creating these neural pathways that my
Right.
body was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And
Sure.
I had to learn to disarm those things. It's the only way.
Yeah.
And the only way you learn what your triggers are is you need to go back and face the fact that you suffer
Right.
from anxiety. That's what you
Right.
and
Wait.
I
Yeah.
wanna get back to what you said earlier, is that I think many people hide the fact that they have anxiety. Number one, because of
Yeah.
stigma. Want as jy mos nou anxiety dan jy malok dan nie verstaan nie.
Yes. I
En
want to
ons
touch on
gemeenskap
that.
as daar die ding
Yeah.
van you know,
Yes.
there's this stigma around it that something is wrong with you, and it's your brain is an organ like every other organ in your body. When you have a situation with your liver or your heart or your lungs or whatever, we are okay with that, but we
Yeah.
kind of like have this thing of when people have anxiety, for
Right.
instance, that there's something drastically wrong with them. No, it's not. It's an organ that functions like every other
Yeah.
organ in your body. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to touch on Heather's listening to us this afternoon as well, and she's just made an interesting point. She says that in the comments to the stream, that protective response you do with your fingers is called stimming. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Something I learned managing my anxiety, and so good for people around you to know what it is and what it means when you do it. This is awesome. Thanks, Heather. Thanks for tuning in and listening to us. But it's
Thanks, Heather.
she raises a very important point again. It's important for people around you to know. I wanted to touch on this thing, the stigma component in our communities. The fact that people, I mean, we never, hardly ever spoke about mental illness, and anxiety is classified as a mental illness. In speaking to a psychiatrist very recently, he used this beautiful analogy. He said the body, like the body, is made up of organs, different organs. So too is a car made up of different organs, and the car needs to be serviced. And if you look at the car, the brain is like the wheels on a car. It takes the biggest strain. The brain is the
Yeah.
thing that rubs against the floor, that rubs against the tar, that takes the heat most of the time. And so, if we are servicing the car by changing oil and we replace a windscreen, or you have damage, you do scratch repairs, how much more shouldn't we be taking care of the wheels or the tires?
Mm.
And this is a thing in our community. Mental illness gets stigmatized so easily, but yet it's that important, busiest part of the brain, I think,
So,
or the busiest part of the body, which is the brain, that needs service, that needs help, that needs intervention, that needs guidance, that needs all these beautiful things. How do you, in your view, Niven, how do we deal with the stigma in our society? Before you answer, I want to just highlight the fact that depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and all of those other mental illnesses is a challenge in our communities. And it's so easy to label people. And I don't even want to touch on suicide and all of that. That's a different component. It's linked, but it's a different conversation. But we can so easily label people who are suicidal. How do we remove, or what do we do in our communities to change the stigma?
so thankfully, Tony, I have a little bit of experience in dealing with people with mental illness. My brother, who was born ahead of me, 3 years, 4 years ahead of me, Errol, he
Yeah.
was born with a mental disability. Right, he can't speak. The doctors said that he would live till 16. He's 42 years old today.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So growing up with a brother with a mental disability, especially in the northern areas of Port Elizabeth, where people are not educated about mental illness, that was a scary, eye-opening thing for me. Me and my brother would play maybe in the front yard, and people would walk by, especially, and this is where I want to appeal to parents. Parents, educate your children about mental illness.
Yeah.
You don't know how hurtful it is to people who actually have family members with mental illness, when kids stop and stare and laugh and point and all those kind of things.
Wow.
So I've made it my duty in life, Tony, whenever I'm out with my brother, for instance, we go to the shopping center or whatever, I would stop, and I would, or when my 9-year-old boy's friends comes around, and Errol is with us in the house or whatever, I would stop and I would sit him down. I would say to him, "This is Uncle Errol," and I introduce him as Uncle Errol because I want him to realize that this is an adult person, even though he
Correct.
acts like a child. And so
Correct.
I would say, "This is Uncle Errol. When he was born, they hurt his brain, and this can happen to anybody. You
Yeah.
can you can
Yeah.
meet somebody today, and they can fall and have an accident and hurt a part of their brain, and they can be just like him because they hurt his
Yeah.
brain at birth. So it's an injury that's not going to go away." And
Right.
this is something that we have to deal with as a family. And Tyler, my 9-year-old boy, has come around to this thing. So he calls my brother Uncle Errol, right? Because we expect
Sure.
that same tone of respect from him, as you would to any other adult. So the
Yeah.
first thing, Tony, is taking away or recognizing the fact that there's a problem that exists in terms of education when it comes to
Right.
mental illness in our
Right.
community. Right? That's the very first thing. And the onus, especially when it comes to people who are curious about this,
Mm.
if you don't know, walk up. We don't mind you asking. We really
Yeah.
don't mind you. What we
Yeah.
do mind is you misunderstanding the situation and
Sure.
and behaving poorly towards the
Sure.
situation. That's what we do mind. So I would say the first thing is that let's take away the mystery around mental
Right.
illness.
Mental
Walk up
illness.
to somebody, or if you are curious about it, you walk up. I promise you, if you see a family with a child who's maybe mentally disabled, if you walk up and say, "Would you mind me asking, what happened?" I can
Yeah.
guarantee you they would appreciate that more, because the
Right.
question comes from a place of purity. It doesn't come from a place of kind of like condescending looks
Yeah.
and stares and all that kind of stuff. So education is a big part about it, only. That's the
Yeah.
first thing. And then
Right.
second, not only in public, but self education. Make the effort to read up on these things.
Sure.
There's plenty and plenty and plenty of information around. We live in the age of information. There's no need, or there's no necessity to be ignorant anymore or lack
Correct.
education when it comes to mental illness.
Correct.
That's a very, very, very big thing, Tony. And then
Absolutely.
I think and then I think the other thing is, speak to your medical practitioners. If you are not sure about what
Yes.
these words mean, all that kind of stuff, when you visit your GP, ask him. Listen, can I ask you a question about mental illness? I've been
Yeah.
having these feelings, just to take away that fear. And when people fear being diagnosed, only you create the self-inflicted prison, I call it, and it's no fun living in a self-inflicted prison when the key to your freedom is a simple question or a simple conversation.
Very true. Very, very true. I remember touching on this with Shakira Hendricks last week when we spoke about their son Yahya, who's diagnosed with autism, and I
Great
remember,
work, by the way, on that, and I was happy to see the result with them being able to supply him with those milkshakes. That was very
yeah,
cool, man.
big ups to Munir Jiva for coming to the party there in a very special way. But I was telling her that very much the same thing you mentioned, that self education, we cannot claim ignorance anymore with regard to mental illness, especially as adults. When we were children, our parents perhaps didn't want to talk about it, and as a result we
Mm,
didn't know much. But as we are adults
mm,
today, we owe ourselves the opportunity to educate ourselves where this is concerned. So there's no more reason for
yep.
us to say, I don't know. And more so, our children don't have an excuse because of us having to educate ourselves where this is
Sure,
concerned.
sure.
Absolutely that.
To- to- Tony, just lastly on that point, I
Yeah.
want to encourage also people who know that they suffer from anxiety. Often, these people live also in denial, or it's
Yeah.
only their immediate family members that know. And
Yeah.
that's your right and your prerogative. If you don't feel like you should share it with any other person, but my journey has been a little bit different. I found that more people relate to me on my weaknesses than they do on my strengths.
Right.
I often make the analogy of Jesus hanging on the cross, where the entry points of Jesus' scars in his hands becomes the
Yeah.
entry point for healing for someone else.
Right.
And I think that's so vitally important. Many of us might not have the right words or the medical terms for it, but what we can
Yeah.
do is, and again, I would liken it to a situation in the Bible where Jesus heals this blind man, and he goes off, and they ask him, who healed you? And he said, I don't know. But what I can tell you is I once was blind, but now I see. This guy doesn't have the intricate explanations of how the brain functions,
Yeah.
or how the optical nerves work, or how all of this somehow came together, but he has a story to tell, and his story is, I once was blind, but now I see. And
Yeah.
his story becomes the entry point of healing to so many, many, many other people. If only we are bold enough to speak about our weaknesses and make it
Sure.
normal to not have this kind of like curated life of perfect living on Facebook and Instagram,
Yeah.
and to the influencers. I would choose to be a non-influencer. I would choose to rather be somebody who makes my life meaningful and
Right.
worthwhile. And I found that so many people have inboxed me after I've shared on Facebook things. I would say, listen, the first week of lockdown was bad for me. Insomnia is a big
Yeah.
sign of anxiety.
Yeah.
And I would speak about my restlessness at night. I would speak
Yes.
about my experiences of feeling helpless, feeling fearful, and people would maybe not want to comment on that status. They would like it,
Yeah.
but then later on I would have an inbox like, listen, when this thing is over, can we have a coffee? And
Yeah.
I found that that's also a big source of education for people. So
Yeah.
people who are living with this thing, and maybe you've overcome your anxiety, you've overcome your fear, you've learned to manage it better, I would encourage you, speak about it bravely and
Right.
boldly.
Right.
And I guarantee you that you will influence so many people and touch so many people's lives who are maybe living in that prison. And I would go as far to say as you could maybe short circuit a path that this person is on that could be terribly destructive at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? As you speak, I'm reminded of that with anxiety, and you're not acknowledging it or identifying it and acknowledging it, you're not living a full life. Let's be honest. You are living on
Yeah,
the edge. Your family is under pressure and under strain, and this thing is really holding you back from living a full life. And I have found often in families, look, our families are not always perfect, but they are relatives
never.
generally. Yeah, but there's normally relatives who want to support if you open up
Yeah.
to them. If not relatives, we've got a good friendship circle. I mean, I can talk to you. I can speak to Elliot. I can speak to Shane. There's a few guys that I can
Yeah.
speak to, and we can relate about stuff. And to those who are listening this afternoon and watching us, if you can't open up to family, open up to friends. Open up to somebody you hold dear and that you can trust, and so you can just share your heart, so that, because when this thing triggers, surely you want to be able to offload on somebody. You must, and we're just creating the opportunity to talk about it this afternoon, so that we want to kill this, the stigma, yes, but also kill the fallacy that mental illness can't be spoken about. Just an observation. Debbie Hendricks is listening to us as well. Debbie says that not only stigma in our community, when we spoke about stigma, she says not only stigma in our community, but in the workplace as well. That is a big one. It often presents in high performance individuals that know that it is a professional risk to go public with your mental illness. That is so true, eh? Because now you've got this guy that is tops, that is and but there's stuff that causes him to go off, and
Yeah.
the stigma is just could be a deciding factor between him getting a promotion or not, him having a job or not, especially in the environment we find ourselves in today.
Yeah.
So
Professionally, Tony, I would encourage people, if you do find yourself in a situation, there are laws that will protect you also
yeah,
against the situation. Okay. So
so
that's the
true.
first thing. But she's absolutely correct. I
Yeah,
remember when I went through this thing, it's almost like you don't want to tell people, because,
right.
and she's absolutely, this thing presents itself in high performing people. And the reason why it does that mostly, and especially in men, is because the we lose the balance of on and off.
Yeah,
There's no longer a switch
yeah.
between home life and work life, right? So what happened with me was is that I would wake up in the morning and the first thing I would do is check my email, and that became another trigger for me when I hear the ping sound
Yes,
on my phone. Back
yes.
then it was BlackBerry still, and I would immediately go into a frenzy and think, what went wrong at work now again, right? And so your life becomes one flat line. There's no longer
Yeah,
an on and off rhythm.
right.
Especially in the modern world that we live in, Tony, our ancestors, when the sun came up, there was light, we worked. When the sun went
Yes,
down, before we learned
yes,
to harness the power of electricity, we
yes.
went to go and sleep. There was a clear definition of what's on and what's off, or what's day and what's night. And
Right.
so, thankfully, or I don't know if I can say, well, there's many benefits to living in a technologically advanced world, but we now live in a world where you could have day at night and you can have night in daytime.
Yeah,
We have this technology, and so we are totally out of sync when it comes to nature. And that's something that I've had to learn to do. And so one of the things, one of my coping mechanisms is fishing.
good.
I'm lucky enough to own a boat,
I
so
want to
when I
talk
go out
about
onto
that.
the boat, I'm
Yeah,
okay. So
I want
we
I
can
want to
speak
talk
about
about
coping
that.
mechanisms later. Yeah.
Yeah, wait. I was actually asking Ronwin last night about that particular coping mechanism, and I want you to answer it. But before I ask you the question,
Yeah.
I must acknowledge some friends who are listening to us. Drizzy is enjoying our talk this afternoon. Elliot, our great friend, thanks so much, Bud, for listening in. And then Mashra is always there listening to us, so thanks. And then there's Crispin Domingo, next you'd know. who's in Uganda. He says, thanks, Antonio. Niven, I like these kinds of conversations and more the platform. Greetings from Uganda. Are we international if he's greeting us from Uganda? Anyway, just a thought.
Hey,
Anyway, I think lockdown has come and it's brought different opportunities. This is a side note. Lockdown has come, brought different opportunities, and there will be multiple opportunities in business. But it's also brought us to sit still at home and to have these conversations. And that's exactly why conversations is happening. Coming back to the coping mechanism, I was telling Ronwin last night, and I was joking, but I want you to answer this. I said, what is the difference between us sitting at home with all the resources we have at home and Niven sitting on the Swartkops River catching fish? He's in lockdown in a boat anyway. Isn't there?
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
big difference. How do you view
That
it? Because that's one of your coping mechanisms. Yet the environment
that
technically is
yeah.
similar.
We actually had a conversation, myself and another friend who also owns a boat, the other evening. We're trying to lobby the powers that be to let
Yeah.
people actually go out and fish, because if you think about it, if we go to a supermarket, there's about 60, 70 people in there. You often have contact with them, touching things that they've touched. But if you are on the river on a boat, and this is probably the bias in me speaking, there's
Right.
that's the best form of social distancing, in my opinion.
It is. It absolutely is.
So,
Yeah.
so fishing became a coping mechanism for me a very long time ago, Tony. It goes back to the days of my dad. He was a fisherman. He owned a little dinghy, and so that's where I learned to fish. And I'd let it go for years and years and years. I got very involved in church life, which took away the weekends totally, because you're either involved in a prayer meeting or in a youth group or in something. So there was really no other time for me for social interaction. That's a situation I put myself in,
Sure.
not anybody else. I chose to
Right.
disengage from all the activities that I used to, in order to focus on what I thought what my life was about then. But then a couple of years ago, I started getting in touch with fishing friends again. A good friend of
Right.
yours and myself, Naidu,
Yeah.
he invited me along on his boat, and he said to me, "Listen, come, let's go fishing." And we went
Yeah.
fishing
Yeah.
about twice, and something reconnected with me and the ocean and being away from everything else. Just the sound of the waves against the boat, the hull of the boat, and
Wow.
that somehow
True.
brought a calming effect into my life, Tony, that
Yeah.
I can't explain. It's something that's very, very dear to my heart. 2 weeks later, I went to go and buy my first boat after that fishing trip, and
Yeah.
I've never looked back ever since. I'm looking out the window and I'm looking at the boat, and I'm somewhat getting sad now that I can't be on the river.
Yeah.
I remember myself and you and our boys. We took them on the river, and they had such a blast. It's
Amazing.
also a very good way of building a relationship with your family, being away
Yeah.
from the distractions of TV and the internet and all those kind of things that actually it fuels our anxiety,
Yeah.
because we're exposed to so much
Right.
information. And when I'm out there, it's absolutely calm. Stacey hates it because I smell like pilchards when I come home,
Yeah.
but she enjoys the
It's
fish
just
that I catch. So yeah,
That's just the consequence. In fact, Ronman, in your defense, was telling me that there's nothing better than having the sun on your face, the wind against your body, and you just being free in a open ocean or open river, and
yeah,
and and that is huge when it comes to coping with anxiety. But
yeah,
coming back to lockdown and being at home, is there any specific things that you do at the moment that helps?
yeah.
That people who are listening this afternoon could maybe adapt and try out as a
Hmm.
coping mechanism.
Yeah. So we, as a family, we try to go for long walks in the morning. That's the first thing,
Right.
to kind of like wake up your organs, to make sure that,
Yeah.
walking, number one, much like fishing and what Ronman
Yeah.
said, we are the reason why we enjoy it so much is because we are tactile beings. Tactile meaning we feel things. When we are
Yeah.
connected to the soil or the water, that awakens some primal kind of instinct within us to be alive, right?
Yeah.
To enjoy the fact that we are alive. So that's the first thing, is to in the morning. One of my, well, bad habits is to read the news. I've stopped that, simply
Sure.
because in lockdown, especially, what will fuel your anxiety is the numbers.
Yeah.
It's a
Very
it's
true.
it's a big thing, the numbers game. So when you see a jump of 653 infections, you immediately start thinking, okay, well, when is that thing coming to me? When is
Yeah.
it going to happen to me? So I'm not saying be ignorant, but in the words of Denzel Washington, I think he said that if you read if you read the news, you're ill-informed. If you don't read the news, you are uninformed. So there's a balance that we kind of need to create there,
Very,
right?
very.
As you would know, you and I did a current affairs show together. People like you and I are often we are addicted to the news. I used to
Oh
buy
yes.
3 4 newspapers on a Sunday morning. You want to
Yeah.
be in the know, and
Yeah.
that's also an addiction. If people don't know about it, but being addicted to information is a very very real
Very true.
addiction.
Yeah.
It's one that I've had to learn to manage. I now would read anything else except the news on some days.
Yeah.
Some days I don't open News 24 at all because there's
Yeah.
just no good
Yeah.
news.
Yeah.
Absolutely, so that's one of the things that I've implemented in my life. Stacey actually said to me, and I said to her, I think it was the fourth or fifth day of log. I said I didn't read the news today, and I'm starting to feel better. And she said, but I told you, and
Wow.
so often we don't we hear, but we don't listen.
Yeah.
And
The one
so
thing. Yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
you were saying.
That I was going to go on to my second point of how you can manage better during lockdown, and
Right.
that is to listen to the people who love you the most. People who will
Ah.
criticize you not because it comes from a place that is critical, but because it comes from a place of love. She would say
Yeah.
to me, "You slow down over here." Just because they often we have these blind spots. And a blind spot is something that you can't see yourself, but somebody else can
Yeah.
very well see it. And listen to the people who love you. They are not there to kind of criticize you for the sake of making themselves feel better. Let's leave that for
Yeah.
Facebook. These are the people who actually care about you.
Absolutely. Wow, that is so true. Eh? And those people generally have your best interest at heart.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I just want to jump back to some comments by some of our friends this afternoon, and I've not pre-read it, so I'll just read it as it comes. Bradley Agnew says, talking about mental health initially makes you feel like you disappointed the family and friends and colleagues, especially if you are that guy that everyone talks to about their problems, comes to you for guidance, etc.
yeah.
But far from the truth, as you know, the more you talk about it, the more it frees you. Wow, that's so
Uh,
cool. Thanks.
if
That's
if I can
that's
respond to Bradley there, Tony, I think also people who are exactly this, the kind of character he describes, the dependable guy, the guy who
right,
takes responsibility, kind of the
right.
big brother of the community and the family often. And so
Yeah,
one of the things that I've had to learn is to prioritize myself.
yeah,
Is that you don't if you can't make time, you take time.
yeah.
I like the announcement they often make on an airplane when you get in that says, before you help anybody else, put on your own oxygen mask first.
Right.
In order for you to help anybody else before
Very
if this
true.
thing has to go down, make sure
Yeah.
that your lungs are filled so that you can have the strength to
Wow.
help other people.
Absolutely true. Just a comment from Andrew Peterson, another good friend of ours. Thanks for openly and casually chatting about such a sensitive topic, guys. Something so important, but which people rather choose to avoid. I trust that this will spur on new conversations and bring healing. And then just Lana Nell says, "True, great discussion, guys. We want more. We want more. I don't know what more." Guys, we're open to topics, discussions in future. If there's anything you feel that we need to talk about in detail like this, please drop us a comment, and we're glad to go into detail. I know I've been reached out to by and she's gonna kill me for forgetting a name. Maybe I shouldn't mention a name, and I'm not using it as an excuse, but to talk about teenage pregnancy, even there's a lady who had her first child at the age of 15 in our community in Helenvale of all
Mhm.
places, and a second
Yeah.
child at age 16. My man, how do you cope
Oh.
with that? Yeah, so I'm looking forward to talk to her sometime soon around teenage pregnancy, and I think that conversation is going to take the line of when our young girls are under pressure and they don't know how to say no, or when the pressure is so much where you don't have a choice and you become a
Mhm.
mother at the age of 15. So we'll talk about that in the future. But to wrap up this conversation today on anxiety, if you've got any last remarks or comments, questions for us to deal with, please drop it in the comment section, and we will definitely have a look at it. Last thoughts from your side, my friend. We don't know when lockdown is going to end. We're moving in levels now. I think it was, in fact, when levels came about, people thought it's a different thing, but we're actually continuing in lockdown. It's just that there's some liberties to do certain things, but it's actually an extension of where we were. And for some of us, or most of us who can work and work from home, the challenge will still exist. Last thoughts from your side?
I think also I want to speak to and I'm going to say my people out there, and when I say my people, I'm not trying to segregate. I'm trying to I want to speak to the creatives out there also, because the question you asked earlier, and this is I know so many creatives who suffer from this thing in silence. On a Friday night, for instance, I get up on stage and I tell jokes for 30 minutes. I'm a comedian, as many people know as well. But on a Saturday morning, I wake up and you'll feel absolutely deflated. Let's not get addicted to adrenaline. That's a very, very important point. This is one of the things my wife actually noticed about me, is that I'm often very restless. What's next is always the next thing, and we are never ever living in the beautiful moment called the now, Tony. I want people to realize that the brain is a very, very powerful thing. And often what spurs on this anxiety thing is either we project into the future, which creates this anxiety as to what can be, or we kind of meditate on the past, which is the regrets and the things that we should have done, and that takes us away from this moment called now. If you think about it, right now, everything you need to be alive and everything for you to be happy, you have right now. You have this beautiful conversation about anxiety. You have breath in your air. Earlier I said you have breath in your lungs. Earlier I said that breath is such a sacred thing for me also, Tony. It's the very first thing you do when you are born. It's the last thing you do when you die. There's something spiritual, deeply, deeply sacred about what we do with our breath. And I think that is something that people, if you're feeling anxious, take a deep breath, focus on the feeling of the air actually entering your nostrils, and be thankful that something more ultimate in yourself is actually granting you the opportunity to have that breath. So, Tony, I want to thank you also for the opportunity, man.
Yeah, great. Just a last shout out to Alistair Hilbrun. He thinks he's hiding from me, Niven. He says you're very brave and thanks for the conversation. But he thinks he's hiding from me. I'm still getting to him because there's some interesting conversations we need to have. And like
definitief. Kyk hierso, hy moet 'n bietjie praat van die gemeenskaplike werk wat hy mee besig is daarso asseblief.
Yes. That's baie goed. And I'm thinking, Alistair, in particular, when I have the conversation around teenage pregnancy, I think you've got a big role to play there, and to bring us the perspective from the social welfare department, and see how help is available to young girls. So we'll get to that conversation. But next, thanks for today. We've almost been at it for an hour, buddy.
But thank you very much, Tony, man.
If anybody, once again, last time, as Niven says, let's live in the moment called now. If you need to, I'm going to, on behalf of us, throw out a lifeline here. If people need to chat, and they feel that, listen, I'm in this boat you guys are describing, I just need some guidance. There's nobody else I can talk to in my circle, or there's nobody else I want to talk to in my circle because this thing is so close to me and they won't understand me. Reach out to us. We can be a listening ear. Niven can be a listening ear. I can be a listening ear. Alistair can be a listening ear, and we can help you through and navigate this time. Thanks, buddy.
Sure.
Have a good
Thank
evening.
you very much. Just in closing, Tony, I just want Alistair to know that in this conversation over here, there's no carpets that he has to walk on. Okay. Cheers.
Cheers, bud. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You're welcome to comment and suggest any future topics. We are more than willing to look at it and consider it. The idea behind conversations is to deal with real challenges, real stories about ordinary life. Tell stories about people who we see on face value and we don't realize the challenges that they go through and that they navigate. And so we through conversations, we want to put a spotlight on that, and in so doing, bring education, share that there's more to life than what we see on face value. So we really appreciate you being part of this afternoon. Have yourselves a good evening further. Until next time, which is tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. I'll post during the course of this afternoon what tomorrow's conversation is about. But it should be around Mother's Day and mothers in particular. And this is Zach. He's coming to tell me he's going to make me some tea now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Going to make me some tea. This is the best tea maker. I don't want Eli to hear this though. But he's the best tea maker. Eli is the best coffee maker in a house. Cheers, guys. Have a good evening.